Michigan courts. Well, federal courts and state courts have the same 3 tiers. So just like before, we've got our trial courts of original jurisdiction, we've got the Court of Appeals, and we've got the Supreme Court, right? So let's begin with the trial courts of original jurisdiction in Michigan. Now, I am going to ask you to find in your course pack handouts a particular document which you have, of course, already looked at prior to coming to class and taken the quiz with, called Michigan Judiciary. And I'm going to switch over here. It looks like that. It's on page 8 of your course pack handouts. And it shows all of the Michigan Judiciary trial courts of original jurisdiction. So we've got 2 criminal courts and 2 non-criminal courts. This is going to be a very important document to you because you're going to need this to write your courtroom experience paper. Because one of the things I'm going to ask you to tell me is, what does the specific court that you visited do? Your goal is going to be to convince me that you know what you're talking about in these papers. So what does that court do? Where would you go and get that information? Right here. Right here. So now you know where that is. You knew that already, right? From previously looking at it before coming to class and doing really well on the quiz. Yeah. All right, let me come back to the trial courts of original jurisdiction. So let's begin with the lowest of the trial courts in Michigan, the district court. How do we know that's a state court, not a federal court? It doesn't say U.S. at the beginning, so we know that it is a Michigan court, Michigan District Court. All right, I put this in red because you've got it on your handout, but if you want to write it down, you can. District Court processes all misdemeanors to conclusion. So if you are charged with a misdemeanor, your case will begin and end in District Court. District Court handles the misdemeanors from beginning to end. It determines civil matters up to $25,000. So if you wish to sue somebody for $25,000 or less, then your lawsuit would be heard in the district court. So Dylan has just bought himself a new car, but it's not a new car, it's a used car, and he bought it from a private party who he thought was a nice guy, kind of a friend of his, an acquaintance anyway. And he shells out $11,000 for this good new used car. And he drives it around for about a week, and all kinds of stuff just starts going wrong with it. Upon further inspection, it turns out his so-called friend, his acquaintance, has pulled a fast one on it. Yeah, it had bad hoses, it had bad belts, all kinds of stuff. And this guy took some black spray paint and sprayed everything up and cleaned the engine all up nice so it looked good. Looked like it was going to be a good vehicle, and it turns out that it's a real lemon. So Dylan, appropriately incensed, goes back to the guy and says, "Hey, you sold me a lemon, I want my money back." And the guy says, "Hey, caveat emptor, baby, let the buyer beware. You know, you bought it, you're SOL." Well, Dylan's a little angry and upset, and we can't do pistols at 20 paces anymore at high noon. So instead, he's going to sue this guy for his money back. Right, so he files a lawsuit in the district court, and he's going to try to get his $11,000 back in this lawsuit. Does that make sense? Okay. It handles small claims proceedings. Now, these are also civil proceedings, but small claims, right? Little stuff. And you're filling out your study guide right now, right? Yeah, because I'm giving you the answers on your study guide right now. Handles small claims proceedings up to $5,500. Remember we talked about that standard of proof, preponderance of evidence, and I made reference to the Judge Judy, Judge Joe Brown stuff? That's what small claims is. That's a small claims court. It's a lawsuit. It's a civil case. It's a civil trial, but it's for small potatoes. So the standard of proof for all civil matters, whether they're bigger or smaller, is still preponderance of the evidence, right? it appoints counsel. So somebody says, I don't have enough money to afford an attorney. Will the court appoint one for me? And the court will do that. Right, the district court will appoint counsel right at the beginning of the case. You need an attorney, you can't afford one, you meet all the criteria for having an attorney appointed for you, we'll do that. Fixes bail and accepts bonds in all criminal matters, whether they're misdemeanors or felonies. Because as we'll be learning next week and in the following weeks, all cases begin in district court. Misdemeanors end in district court, but all cases begin there, even felonies. So whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony case, the district court will deal with the bail issues. And finally, and we'll be getting into this in great detail in our next unit after our first exam, it conducts examinations on felonies to determine whether probable cause exists. It's called a preliminary examination. We'll get into that later on. But in essence, the district court judge is performing a screening on a felony case to make sure that there is enough evidence to warrant moving it up into the circuit court where felony cases are processed. Right, we don't want to clog up the circuit court because it's very busy with important cases. We don't want to clog it up with cases that aren't going to fly. So the district court judge looks at the case and says, yes, there is probable cause to move it forward, or no, it isn't, let's get rid of it. As I say, we'll talk about that in a lot more detail later. But these are the things, these are the 6 things that a district court does in Michigan. Circuit court. How do we know this is a Michigan court? There's no U.S. on it. Now, you see the problem here, though. The federal circuit court is what kind of a court? It's an appeals court. And the Michigan circuit court is what kind of a court?
Trial court.
Trial court of original jurisdiction. So you can see how you would get kind of in a little trouble if you got those two mixed up. It wouldn't be the end of the world if you mixed up the district courts, because the U.S. district court is a trial court and the Michigan district court is a trial court. They do the same thing. So it probably wouldn't be the end of the world if you got those mixed up a little bit. But if you mix up the circuit courts, you can see the problem, right? Because the federal circuit court is an appeals court. The Michigan circuit court is a trial court. Therefore, you see the importance of remembering United States Circuit Court of Appeals. Its complete full name. That way you don't mix it up with the Michigan court. So this is the Michigan Circuit Court. The Michigan Circuit Court processes all felonies to their conclusion. And once the district court judge says, yep, good to go, kick it over into the circuit court where it belongs, now the circuit court takes over and processes that case all the way to the end. Civil determinations in excess of $25,000. So big time lawsuits. Big time lawsuits, more than $25,000. Let's say that your grandma's been in poor health. Let's say she's got the sugar going on, right, the diabetes. And because of really bad circulation in her lower extremities, she's developed some real badness in her right foot. In fact, it's kind of getting nasty and stinky and gangreney. And the surgeon says, oh, that's got to come off because you're going to wind up going septic. If we don't take that off, we're going to have to amputate that. Otherwise, it'll go septic and it'll kill you. So your grandma goes into surgery and wakes up and she's missing a foot. But it's the wrong one. They took the left foot off instead of the right foot. Which means, here's the problem, you see, because there was nothing wrong with the left foot and the right foot's still bad and it's got to come off. So now grandma has got no feet. Yeah, now you got Grandma Stumpy and she's going to be stumping around for the rest of her life. And you got to imagine that she's pretty darn upset about this. You got to imagine that she's so upset that she's going to sue the ever-loving socks off of that doctor in that hospital, yes? And who can blame her, right? Because if you're going to stump around for the rest of your life, you might as well do it with some money in your pocket. So grandma's going to sue the socks off of them. That's what circuit court does. Here's appeals from district court. So instead of Danny the drug dealer, we're going to have Danny the drunk. And he lost his drunk driving case in district court, misdemeanor. And he makes an appeal. He thinks there was an error of law. So that's going to go as far as the circuit court. Make sense? The district court and the circuit court are the two courts that I want you to go to. Okay, both of those are criminal courts. I mean, there's some civil matters and some other stuff in them too, but that's where you're going to see your criminal cases as well. The next two courts we talk about are not criminal courts. They deal with other things. So I would rather that you didn't go to those, because you'll probably be bored. And your papers will be a lot better if you go to circuit and district. And, you know, hey, you're criminal justice students, and you should probably understand how the criminal courts work. So if you're looking for the action, you know, it's going to be your district court and your circuit court. But let's go to the family division of circuit court. This is a non-criminal division of the circuit court that deals with family-related issues. It's a non-criminal division of the circuit court that deals with family-related issues. You won't see criminal cases here. So what they did way back in 1998 is they split the circuit court into two divisions. One is the criminal and civil division, and the other is this one here, the family division of circuit court. And for a long time, they were very separate and distinct from one another. The family courts often even had their own judges. But what has happened in times of budgetary crunching and downsizing and retirements is, despite their lofty intentions of keeping everything separate, they are becoming increasingly commingled. And you might see a judge doing a criminal case while you're watching, and then all of a sudden they take a recess and they come back, and that same judge will be doing a family court case. And you're going, what? That's why. Because a lot of times judges retire now and they're not replacing them. They deal with divorces and those ancillary matters, you know, the messy ones like custody and parenting and paternity and all of that kind of stuff. If you've been a child of divorce, you know what I'm talking about. Offenses against juveniles. So a juvenile who might be abused or neglected, status of minors, that sort of thing. Juvenile court adjudications. So a child that was charged with an offense would go to a juvenile court and their case would be heard here. Personal protection orders. When somebody's harassing you, somebody's stalking you, you can go in and get a personal protection order against them. Name changes. You get married, you need to change your name. You get divorced, you need to change your name. Adoptions. You want to adopt somebody, there you go. And parental consent waivers. So all of these are family-related matters, but the family courts deal with it. And then we have the probate court. Probate court is also a non-criminal court that deals with the following issues. Money. I mean, really, that's the essence of it, money. Wills and estates. Mental competency adjudications. Guardianships, conservatorships. All of these are about money.
For the mental competency, does that go along with insanity in a criminal trial, or does that stay in the circuit court?
That's more about circuit court. Hold the phone for a second, I'll explain this. When I was a court officer for Bay County, most of the time if a judge called for a standby, they wanted a deputy in the courtroom for a standby because they thought things were going to blow up, 90% of the time it was in probate court. It was not in the criminal circuit court, it was not in the criminal district court, it was in probate court, because probate court is all about money. And people are essentially, pardon my French please, greedy bastards. And that's what you see going on in here. Wills and estates, right? So dad's been gone for a while, mom's been ailing, she's been in a home, and the sister's been taking care of mom first in the home, and then she had to move her to a nursing home, but she goes and visits her and takes care of all of her needs and everything, and mom dies and leaves everything to the sister. Now there's a brother, he's been out in California, and he's only come out to visit mom a couple of years in the last 20, a couple of times. And he hasn't done diddly squat and he hasn't sent any money or anything. So mom basically wrote him out of the will. So daughter gets all the money, brother gets pissed off and says, hey, that's not fair, she's my mother too, I want my half. and then go to court to duke it out. Mental competency adjudications. That's what Ben was asking about. The most common scenario nowadays is something like this. You have an elderly parent. Now let's say your mom or your dad, you're an adult that's a little bit older too. Your mom or your dad's like in their 80s or 90s. And maybe you're in your 50s or 60s. And you're going to go to court to get your parent declared mentally incompetent. In other words, that they are not capable of making their own decisions, financial ones especially. And you get power of attorney, so now you can swoop in there and take over all of that parent's finances. In other words, instead of waiting for the parent to die to inherit the money, you're going to take it now.
What about like giving somebody up to the state due to mental reasons?
Yeah, they would deal with stuff like that too.
The family court. Wouldn't the family court deal with it? Because my biological mother gave her rights up to me, but she went to the family court.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, he was talking more about for mental illness issues, I think.
My grandpa's got dementia.
Yeah.
My dad gave him to the state. That'd be like probate.
I think so. I don't take that to the bank, but I would think so. I would think so. Yeah, there was a really interesting movie that was made, I don't know, about 20, 25 years ago called Nuts, like nuts in the head. And basically the whole thing was it was a rich woman who had committed a murder, and her rich parents didn't want the criminal in the family. So they petitioned the court to declare her basically, mentally unsound and put her in an institution instead. Kind of an interesting movie. Check it out if you get a chance. Guardianships, conservatorships, who is going to look after certain people and their money? So you see how this goes. It's all about money. And it can get really, really ugly in there. But you're probably not going to probate court. You're going to go to district, you're going to go to circuit, right? So far, so good? Okay. Appeals courts in Michigan, also known as appellate courts. Appeals, appellate, interchangeable. Now, you know how this works because you did an assignment on this, didn't you? After losing a case in lower court, just like in the federal system, it's the same, a party may appeal. So Danny the drug dealer lost his case. He was not trafficking cocaine though. He was just selling some Pinconning paralyzer out of the back of his car. Yeah. Just like the federal court, it is a review for errors of law. It is not a new trial. Trials are only held where? Trial courts of original jurisdiction. Right? If we say it enough, you'll remember it. Trials are only held in trial courts of original jurisdiction, so this is a review for errors of law. It's not a new trial. And just like any other appeals court, it can do those four things: affirm, modify, reverse, remand. Affirm, modify, reverse, remand. Kind of a beat to it. If we say it enough, you'll remember it. This is an older case, but I just put it up here because it happened locally. It happened in the Saginaw courts. And I just wanted you to see that it does happen. In fact, your circuit court sample paper that I gave you also talks about a case that was an appeal case. So that's what happened here. This guy, Mr. Hothfoot, long story made short here, he got sentenced for a crime, and the judge sentenced him too harshly. And once he realized that, he made an appeal. He said, error of law here, the judge gave me way more time than I should have had for this. So he took the case to appeal. The appeals court sided with him. He said, you're right, sir. She gave you more time than she should have. They remanded the case back to the trial court of original jurisdiction. Since the issue was not his guilt, but his punishment, it was for resentencing. So the judge had to give him a different sentence that fell within the court's guidelines. And that's what happened here. It's a remand.
How would you be able to
sentence somebody outside the guidelines? Because they state the guidelines when you're.
Well, there are some circumstances that allow for deviation. Apparently, this wasn't one of them. There are 4 appeals districts in Michigan. You know this, don't you? Does that look familiar? Yes, that does look familiar. And it's based on population. You can kind of see that in this colored one. So we've got 4 very populated counties down here. We've got, let's see, hard for me to read. Can you read that? Is that Wayne?
Shiawassee,
Shiawassee?
Genesee.
Yeah, right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, Genesee. Okay, Shiawassee.
The Oakland?
Oakland, okay, yep, that's Pontiac. Oakland and Macomb. Okay, those are very populated counties there. Not Shiawassee so much, but the other 3. There's Wayne. Okay, there's your Detroit. So we've got one heavily populated county, and then we've got some cornfield counties.
Why isn't Saginaw thrown in with the Shiawassee, Genesee? I feel like it's just another.
It's just not. I mean,
Too much?
Saginaw is really not that heavily populated. Yeah, it really isn't. I mean, the city itself, you've got some population, but it's been declining. And I mean, most of Saginaw County, if you take a ride out there, it's cornfields.
I guess yeah, that's true. They're gonna let Maryland.
You look at the green here, all these are cornfields except for, you got Grand Rapids in Kent County. Yeah, and you got a couple of big cities down here, but most of that's all cornfields. And then look at here, all of the yellow. Right, so the entire upper part of the Mitt and the Upper Peninsula and all 10 people that live there. Supreme Court. We know that we are talking about the Michigan Supreme Court because it doesn't have U.S. in front of it. So the Michigan Supreme Court is the highest court in the state. It is the court of last resort on state laws. And you have, of course, read how the Michigan Supreme Court works on page 9 of your course pack handouts. So this information here is just a recap of that. The court of last resort on state laws. So the Michigan Supreme Court hears and decides appeals from all 83 counties. And because it is a court of appeals, a Supreme Court of Appeals, but a court of appeals just the same, it may do those same 4 things. Affirm, modify, reverse, remand. You guys will be saying that in your sleep pretty soon. Affirm, modify, reverse, remand. They can do any of those things. The Michigan Supreme Court hears 4 principal kinds of cases. It hears constitutional cases. That is, cases that in some way relate to either the federal Constitution or the Michigan Constitution. It hears family cases. So that's your family court, right? Appeals on family court rulings. Civil cases. Appeals on civil court rulings. And finally, and perhaps most important, criminal cases. The court reviews the criminal cases with the utmost care because it would, of course, be an egregious travesty of justice if a truly innocent person was incarcerated. And equally egregious would be releasing a truly guilty person. So the court spends a good amount of time on this because this is about liberty. And here we have the 7 justices of the Michigan Supreme Court. How many in the federal Supreme Court? 9. How many in the Michigan Supreme Court? 7. All right, we got that. Yes?
It's supposed to be Chief Justice Bridget Mary McCormick. She
I-
was elected in January.
I gave it what they had on the website. Yeah, when I did the cut and paste. So we have Justice Stephen Markman, who has been on the bench the longest now, who was appointed in 1999 and elected in 2000. We have Brian Zahara, who was appointed and then elected. We have Justice Mary McCormick, who was She was elected, yep, she was elected straight up. Vivano was appointed and then elected. Bernstein was straight up elected. Curtis Wilder was appointed and has not yet been elected. And Clement was appointed and has not yet been elected. So what has happened is there were vacancies in the court. And you can't just leave the vacancy there. So the governor goes, abracadabra, you're a temporary employee for a while. Because that's really all an appointed judge is a temp. And they're allowed to fill that position temporarily until, if they want to keep the job, they run for election, and we, the voters, say that we want to keep them on. So both Justice Wilder, yeah, I don't think he's been elected. Oh, wait a minute. He was elected in the last election, wasn't he? Yeah, I think he was. Okay, so she was just appointed anyway, and still needs to be elected if she wants to keep the job. Does that make sense? So we, the people, say what judges we want. But if there's a vacancy, a temporary employee will be appointed. And then if they want to keep that job, then they have to run for it, and we, the voters, have to agree that they should keep that job. That makes sense, right? Yeah? Okay.
You said Elizabeth was elected, or was she appointed?
She was appointed just recently,
Okay. Because
yeah, I think.
that she was.
Yeah, I think she's the only one in there that has been appointed and not yet elected. Yeah. And there we are again, 3 tiers of the Michigan criminal courts. This is even better on this cake here because we can put the district courts down here. We put the circuit courts here. We have our Michigan appeals courts. We have the Michigan Supreme Court. How exciting is that? That's pretty awesome, huh?